We're going to go through our picks for the main conferences, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and the Big East. And we're going to give our selections for each of them and why we chose them. First off, Andrew, we're going to start with the ACC.
ACC, I have Duke coming out of the ACC tournament. Obviously, this is a team that you've been looking at all season long. Cooper Flag comes in. Not everyone knows or actually knew about Cooper Flag, I felt like, until the NBA Select, or not NBA, but Team USA Select tournament. That happened when he was like dunking on people and LeBron was giving him shout outs and whatever. But since then, I feel like he's gotten a lot of notoriety. He was considered one of the best players in college basketball without even playing a game in college basketball. I feel like we had a segment in a different show that we did where we talked about, would Cooper Flag be the best college basketball player in college basketball? And I think he's, at least from my perspective, I don't know how you feel, but I think he's lived up to the hype. And I think he's had a phenomenal freshman season. He leads Duke in points, rebounds, blocks, steals, assists. He is their go-to guy. He does it all for them on the court. If you look at a Duke game, you can't watch Duke game without saying that Cooper Flag did have a major impact on them. And the impact that he's having is done wonders. They're 19-1 in conference play. They're one of the best teams in all of college basketball, with Auburn losing twice now, two straight games. They should be the number one team in the country. They have essentially locked up a number one seed, win or lose the ACC tournament, but I think that they will have no problem sweeping through it. Their only conference loss this season was to Clemson on the road in a game where Cooper Flag, I don't know if you remember that. It was a little bit of a funny clip. It made its rounds on Twitter, so a lot of people saw it, but he slipped at the end. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, where he broke his shoe.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, besides that, they've been perfect all season during conference play. They're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country. They have a couple other guys that do a lot for them. They have a 7'2" freshman, Kamon, who has played every single game as their center. He's their second leading blocks leader, which I think is funny because Cooper Flag leads the team in blocks over a 7'2" center. But they have a lot of good players on that team, and I just think that they're coming out of the ACC tournament. It would kind of shock me if anybody else won the ACC tournament, but I mean, it's possible. It's March.
Oh yeah, of course. It is definitely March, but I'm not going in any sort of different direction here. I'm going to take Duke as well. Like you said, Cooper Flag, it's pretty much just about as far, he will take them as far as he possibly can, and it won't be up to just anybody else. You mentioned the dominance in conference play. They have 17 conference wins, 23.2 points is their average margin of victory against conference opponents. And mainly the question might be just how far can this team go in the actual March Madness bracket? And
I think they recently got the last two wins in conference play, so they're up to 19-1 conference
play.
Well,
shoot, excuse me. Yeah, then
19
win, and I'm sure that number probably went down a little bit, but you still get the point. And also, the ACC isn't as strong this year as it has been in recent years. That's been a big talking point. So I don't see why anybody could go against Duke, at least in the conference tournament.
To add on to that point, though, they've had 8 straight wins, right? And I'm just going to read down the list of them. 21-point win against Cal, 36-point win against Denver, 18-point win against Virginia, 43-point win against Illinois, 37-point win against Miami, 35-point win against FSU, 33-point win against Wake Forest, and 13-point win against the rival UNC on the road. Just one of the best teams in college basketball. You don't see that type of dominance from a lot of college basketball teams. Not only are they winning, they're winning by a lot. And I'm not a big Duke fan personally. They beat up on my Canes twice this season by over 30 points, but I mean, there's not much you can say. That Cooper Flag has the team rolling.
Okay, let's go to the SEC.
SEC, Florida. Oh man, I just mentioned that I'm a Miami fan, so this hurts me to say. Obviously, we have football, so I'll take that. But Miami's just not playing well in basketball either way, so it doesn't really matter. But Florida, I think, is the second best team in the nation. We just talked about who I think is the first best team in the nation. I think Florida follows them right up. They have Walter Clayton Jr., who's been their best player for 2 seasons straight now. It feels like he's averaged over 17 points a game in both of those seasons. He's one of their best leaders on that team. And then you have a guy like Elijah Martin, who comes in as a transfer from FAU. And he was, I don't know if you remember, obviously you remember the FAU Final Four run. He was the leader on that team. He's one of the leaders on that team. He scored 26 points in the loss against SDSU when that buzzer beating loss in the Final Four. Just one of the better players on that team. He comes into Florida, brings everything with him. If anything, he takes another step in the right direction. And this team has beaten two number one teams in the country. They have a bunch of top ranked wins. Obviously, the SEC has been one of the best conference in all of college basketball. I think that the Florida Gators have stood out to me as the best team. Auburn is currently the favorite, which I mean, the odds will probably shift on that a little bit, given the fact that they just lost to rival Alabama. But there's no real wrong way you can go with them with this pick. Auburn's been ranked number 1 in the country. Tennessee's been ranked number 1 in the country. Florida has been up in the top 3. Auburn and Alabama has also been. The SEC has just dominated the top 5 this year, so it's hard to make a definitive pick. But Florida, in my opinion, is the best team in the SEC, and I think that they can take it.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. And I would say that Florida is probably the team that has, from start to finish, been the most reliable throughout this year. And like you said, Walter Clayton Jr., I trust him more so in like the late game scenarios. And I definitely think they have enough size to match up with Janai Broome. If it's not Cooper Flagg to win the Wooden Award, it's Janai Broome. So much respect to Auburn. Could see it going both ways. At the end of the day, this kind of conference tournament isn't going to be the make or break. These teams are looking towards later on in March and into early April potentially. That's where their mind is set. Okay, let's go to the Big Ten.
Big Ten. My pick for the Big Ten is Wisconsin, which is a little bit of a sleeper pick. They're currently at plus 660 if anybody wants the odds on that. I think they're the third ranked team based off the odds. But Wisconsin's been a great team all season long. I feel like they've been slept on a little bit. You wouldn't, based off how much that notoriety they get, they're the number 12 team in the country. You think they'd get a little bit more talking to. The SEC has dominated all of the news media this season, so that's kind of the reason why as well. But they have 2 Johns on their team. John, sorry.
I threw you a little bit of a curveball. We were supposed to go to the Big 12 first, but I sent us to the Big 10. But
you're good. They have John Blackwell, who has been phenomenal for them this season. I like in any game that you watch of Wisconsin basketball, you notice who John Blackwell is. He's taken a 7-point jump in points per game this season. He's been one of the best players on that team, if not in all of college basketball, averaging 15 points a game. He's been like one of 2 John guards that they have that has been just really stood out to me this season. And I just really like the way that they play. I think that anyone can really make a run in the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, you have Michigan State, who has been the top of the class of the Big Ten for it feels like a while now. That conference is never really the best basketball conference. Obviously, you have the days where Michigan and Michigan State were dominating a lot, but they've definitely fallen off this year. They're the 3rd, if not the 4th best basketball conference this season. So definitely taking a step back. But given that, I think anyone can take it. And Wisconsin is my personal pick to come out of the Big Ten this year. I
really think it's a 4-team race here. Michigan State, Maryland, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I went with Michigan State. I wanted to go, I'm actually going pretty chalk here, but it'll be different as we get through the rest of this segment. I'm going to just side with Tom Izzo and those boys. They can't make a 3-point shot to save their lives, but they're still very suffocating on defense, and they shoot 80%, I believe, from the foul line on the season. That is the type of stat that you really like, especially when we're talking about stuff in March. But as you mentioned, the other teams, Michigan, Maryland, they deserve their flowers because at the end of the day, it could be all 4 of those teams, and Purdue's not too far behind either.
Yeah, and the 2 Johns I was talking about, John Tonje is the other John I wanted to mention. He's averaging 18-5 this season. He, like you talk about the charity stripe, that's obviously a huge part of any March tournament. You look at the conference tournaments, you look at March Madness. Feels like these games a lot of the time come down to free throw shooting at the end, and he shoots 91% as their best player. So those 2 guards, John Tonje and John Blackwell, are 2 guards to look into when you're looking at the Big Ten tournament this year, and maybe even a longer March run.
Also, I wanted to mention that Michigan State has beaten all 4 of the other teams that I mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, Purdue, and they beat also Illinois twice, which I think is something to mention. Obviously, we haven't talked about Illinois, but just throwing that out there. They're not too bad, 2011 on the year. Okay, let's go to the Big 12, where we were initially supposed to go right before the Big 10.
All good. In the Big 12, I have Kansas coming out, and it's a little bit more of a sleeper pick than it usually is. They sit at plus 1,100 right now, which is the lowest odds that they've ever had. I feel like in a conference tournament run, they're always towards the top of the Big 12. They're currently the 6th best team in the Big 12, at least record wise. But that being said, they are one of the better teams at playing everybody tough. You look at a Texas Tech game where they only lost by 6 points. You look at just a Houston game where Houston at home, they couldn't close it out against them, but it felt like they were there the whole game. And Hunter Dickinson is between Cooper Flagg, Hunter Dickinson, that was kind of the battle going into the season. I feel like Cooper Flagg has obviously proven that he's the better player. Hunter Dickinson is more experienced, has been in college basketball for 5 years now, but when he's on, nobody's stopping Hunter Dickinson in college basketball. And you see that in the Big 12. When he has his 30-point games, when he has his 20 and 10, he's averaging 17 and 10 for the season. Hunter Dickinson, Kansas goes as Hunter Dickinson goes. And if he can have a good conference tournament, I think that they can easily win. And also their path, the way the Big 12 tournament works is that there's double buys and then they have a single buy. Kansas has one of the single buys, but they'll play either the winner of UCF versus Utah. I don't think that they'll have a problem with either of those teams. And then they go on to play Arizona, who they literally just beat if they do win that game. And Arizona, I think, is a little bit more on the fraudulent side, just me personally. So I think that their path, being on the bottom side, not having to play Houston until what would be the final if they get there, is a little bit easier. Texas Tech, they play them hard this season already. So I could definitely see Kansas making a run in the Big 12 tournament.
So maybe my picks aren't going into the like Cinderella-esque run. I'm not choosing any other team. I think that isn't at the very top of the conference, but I'm going to go with Houston here. I think that just from top to bottom, they're a more complete team. They're shooting 40% from the 3-point line, and they are 10-0 away. And I just think that that is going to bode well for them come conference tournament time and when you're playing in those neutral sites. So I will take Houston. Obviously the 10-0 away record is in conference.
Yeah, rightfully so, though. I think that I was looking down the list of Big 12 conference tournament winners, and there's never been a seed lower than 5 to win the conference tournament since 1997. So that's a fun stat for you. Kansas is actually 6, so I'm like going against that grain. But I mean, in 30 years of conference play, there's never been a Big 12 winner to be ranked lower than 5. So I feel like these March runs, it feels like the Cinderellas come from the actual March Madness tournament, or maybe like some of the Group of 5 tournaments or something like that, where you see lower seeds win. But it feels like when you get into the upper echelon of teams, like they're not losing their conference tournaments as much as you would see like some of the lower, like kind of worse conferences, I guess you could say.
Let's end out on the Big East here. I think we both have the same pick.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people are going against them just because the fact that they've had such a dominant regular season. Obviously, we're talking about St. John's. It being played in Madison Square Garden is also obviously a huge help to like St. John's case. The only thing I don't like about St. John's, before I even get to like why I do like them so much, is that they play a lot of close games. If you look at just their record against who they'd have to play in their first round game, they only beat, who would it be? Wait, I'm
also taking St. John's here as well. Team has just been completely different.
Like,
Second year under Rick Pitino.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go into your reason while I look at the bracket, how it shapes up. But the thing I was going to say is that the teams that they'd be playing in the bracket, they've beaten these teams by no more than double digits, which is a little scary because if you watch St. John's play, they're like they play a lot of close games, which is just scary because it always comes down to the wire. Obviously, they know how to play in these close games now that they've played in so many of them, but it's all like I can easily see St. John's getting knocked out in the second or third round. But against that point, the reason why I did pick them is because against the other top 5 teams in the conference, I think their record is 7-1. So they've been dominant against the best teams in that conference, and it's a down year for UConn. Obviously, Marquette has been good; they've been in the rankings for a significant period of time. But I think that St. John's is better than all of them. If depending on how far Auburn drops, St. John's will be in the top 5. They currently sit at 6. Auburn just lost 2 games to the number 1 team in the country. I don't know if they drop below St. John's, but St. John's could end the season as a top 5 in the country, which is absolutely absurd. I don't think anybody was expecting them to be there, and I think that St. John's can win the Big East tournament.
Well, I don't think I have anything to add to the St. John's pick. Shout out UConn, shout out Creighton, shout out Marquette. They certainly have a shot, but we'll end up seeing what ends up happening in the Big East Conference tournament. Well, those have been our conference tournament picks for college basketball. We'll see if we get them right.